When I was about 3 years old, I had many, many nightmares. And there was a very particular moment where I was sitting out on our front steps and I was thinking about that. And I was really thinking, I don't want to go to sleep. So how can I do this? And little kid thoughts of like, how do I keep myself awake for days? And is that even possible? And just as I kept thinking about that, suddenly I kind of had this insight, oh, that's my job here, is I have to find a way to master my nightmares and then teach other people to do the same.
Welcome, Bonnie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So the dream world is very fascinating and definitely love diving into it. I used to like try to analyze dreams, as a child and kind of got away from it for a while. But then after my spiritual awakening, kind of got back into it. A lot of things happened through dream world. So it's very fascinating. Can you start off sharing a little bit about your background? And then also, was there anything that brought you to the work, like any spiritual experiences or anything like that? Or did you just feel inner calling towards that?
Yeah, so when I was about 3 years old, I had many, many nightmares. And there was a very particular moment where I was sitting out on our front steps and I was thinking about that. And I was really thinking, I don't want to go to sleep. So how can I do this? And little kid thoughts of like, how do I keep myself awake for days? And is that even possible? And just as I kept thinking about that, suddenly I kind of had this insight, oh, that's my job here, is I have to find a way to master my nightmares and then teach other people to do the same. And that was it was a clear insight. I remember it, even now. But then it just kind of like, okay, I get it. And then I'm a kid again. I go and play and whatever. But growing up, both my father and my grandmother told me many dream stories, and they would ask me frequently about my dreams. And it became morning time conversation. Things were very open in that way in my family. And at some point, my father had said to me, because I grew up in a small town, I don't know what it looks like to be interested in dreams. Like, can you make a career out of this? And my father said to me, sometimes people put their dreams in the vehicle of their passions. And that was a really great statement. And he asked me, what other things are you passionate about? And I said, well, writing and psychology. And I listed all these off. And so I began to explore them, and somehow, this has played a huge role in what I do because I really work at that intersect with people of their inner dreaming life and how they bring it into their waking time to make tangible the passions that they hold and what they do. And then the specific dream work that I teach, I looked for a long time. I kept looking to find a teacher, and I had read just a couple of dream books here and there, and nothing, it just wasn't my language. It didn't speak to me. And I had a series of dreams that sort of brought me to the teachings that I teach today. It goes back to the 13th century, but it was more modernized by a woman named Colette Albuquerque-Muscat. And I learned it from one of her students, Dr. Catherine Schoenberg. And so, as the first time that I, stepped into these teachings, I got it. Like this is the language. This is how to understand dreams that I've been feeling that I have, and I just needed to find someone who could hone that and speak to me in that language. So it's been a lifelong journey, and each step of that journey has been a dreaming step, if you will.
Beautiful. Yeah. I find it fascinating that you were three and you kind of knew that. A lot of us kind of do know that, but we step away from it as we go through life. But also with that, like it kind of reminds me, like we choose our parents. And so they were part of your environment, which helps us to integrate into our lives and our journey and as it unfolds. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, most
Mhm.
definitely.
Yeah, so definitely. And can you share a little bit about more of the scientific before? Because I do want to talk about like spiritual. aspects of it and perspectives? And then can you do a little bit about like maybe the scientific on it? Like, is there certain neurons? Now I know we have like the REM sleep, those different states. Can you share a little bit about more of the scientific on the dreams?
Yeah, so one of the things that Colette did in modernizing this work, her father was a neurosurgeon, and she studied at the Sorbonne in Paris and philosophy and worked with Robert Deswal, who was working with this sort of idea of waking dream mode therapy, something like this. And ultimately, she found that too restrictive because it was looking at, sort of a specific set of scenarios. And she felt dreaming to be, and the way the brain works to be way more open than that. And so as I became very serious about this work, I went back and got my PhD in psychology and began to study the cognitive psychology. And then later, because advances are happening every day, the neuropsychology of image. How do images move us? And some of the really interesting things coming out right now is we have two sort of cognitive processing modes, one being the executive network, which we think of when we think about thinking. So if you ask me to add up 2 plus 2, I'm using my executive network. We also have the default network, and that becomes active when the executive network is at rest. And the default network is also active in our dreaming when we're asleep. And it's responsible for the imaginative cognition that we have that draws from autobiographical memory. So any kind of experience we've had before, whether it's a, trip to see a movie with a family member, or it's the smell of popcorn specifically. And these sense impressions and experiences then feature into our dreams because they inform us in a very specific way. They tell us something. Maybe it's this moment of adventure to, smell popcorn because of our first movie experience. Whatever it is for us specifically, the default network takes these sense impressions and experiences and synthesizes them in new ways. And so when we think about image, an image is a sort of holistic information packet that tells us how we feel about something, what we know about something, what we want to do with something. And dreams are composed of images. So it's informing us about how we feel and what we want to do with it. And that's really the default network's thing. It looks back in order to look beyond and go forward.
Mhm. Beautiful. Yeah, and I kind of look at it as like, and maybe this is the same thing that you're saying, but like it kind of in a different way. But like it's like we go through the day and we interpret all so much information, and it's like our body just absorbs everything. We only focus on certain things through our day, and but we're taking in a lot of stuff, and it's like memory that's coming in, and our body holds the memory. And so it's like a processing or a sieve, if you will, like the brain. And then I also understand that, like, if it, for instance, if we look at a movie, we watch a movie, and then we watch it like a year later, we get something totally different out of it. Maybe we've missed that part, but it's a whole different experience because we're maybe seeing it from a different perspective, or, maybe we just didn't, you know, pay attention to that part at that time. But I feel like that works with dreams, you know what I mean? Like you said, the pictures and the images, and we're taking all this information in, and it helps us in the dream state, like when we're trying to process everything that's going on in our life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we're very, very, very busy,
Mm-hmm.
and we go through our day looking outward and focusing outward, and very few of us stop, pause, and look inward. And dreaming is that opportunity to look inward. And I do teach people how to dream while awake in the way that we do it, which is looking inside with a very specific kind of prompt and seeing what images arise. And then understanding and speaking or reading image.
Hmm.
Um, Seeing what that's telling me. Is it showing me that I'm blocked in some way? Is it showing me a potential that I need to bring forward? That kind of thing.
Mm, okay. Now, there are certain things that will, I'm assuming they do, they affects our dreams. And it can be like food, like eating late at night. It could be, of course, if we're doing alcohol, things like that. What are some things that you're aware of? Do you know? Is that actually a true statement? Or because I've heard it from some doctors, oh, you're probably just ate late or something. They use these I guess not really diagnosis, but just a probable cause of what dreams come from or why they're here.
Yeah, it's not, it's our dreams come from our bodies. So I hear in what you're saying about doctors saying, oh, you probably ate late, that it's dismissive of the content of the dream and what the dream wants to tell us. In fact, the dream wants to tell us something that's important, which may include the fact that we've brought something into our body that doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't work if we eat something very spicy late at night, or maybe we're taking a medication that's not working, or on a diet that's not working for our bodies. So, dreams come from the body. So, anything we put in our body is going to affect our dreaming, and that includes media. And that's a really big deal right now because I don't know if people fully understand how inundated we are with media and images from the outside right now. It's really only since 2012 that there's been this complete immersion. And prior to that, there was a more active role that we played. We had to go out to see the movies or go out to rent a video and bring it to our house. Now it's ubiquitous. And there's so many different emotions. I mean, what makes a good movie is an emotion.
Hmm.
And whether it's a movie that we're seeking out or posting that we're seeking out on social media, it's something that's going to give us a little bit of a jolt or a buzz, you know? So those little jolts and buzzes are things coming into ourself, and it can get very busy in there, like too many cars on the road. And I say this because I gave a talk recently, and every single person in the Q&A asked me about nightmares. And it was so striking to me because I usually am asked the same two or three questions in a Q&A, and only one of those questions is about nightmares. But this entire 1 hour Q&A was all about nightmares. And I really feel like it's a sign of today's media consumption because that daily intake is going to affect what my inner reflective experience is going to be.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see how that would be part of that. And there's a lot of fear out there, a lot of stuff that's on social media. Like I can't even go on to what is it, Twitter? I just the minute I open it up, I'm like I get a negative, like a feeling like I got to close this. I can't go on there because they show a lot of stuff like abuse, trauma, things like that on there. So and like with the processing it, we're like you know, it could come up in our dreams, a lot of fear and nightmares. Um, and talk about nightmares, even when I was a child, we didn't have the social media that we do now, but we watched the movie Jaws, and that affected me. Like today, I still kind of have a fear about going into the ocean, but I don't go way out into the ocean, right? But I mean, it affects you. It definitely does. What we're putting into our minds, our bodies, everything, our memory. So definitely. And then I know like my child's ever since I can remember up until probably age 4, he would have nightmares. And like we didn't even know where they came. And so now I'm like, oh, maybe it was like maybe a past life or something or a remembrance. I don't know, but he would have nightmares. And for a child to have nightmares, that doesn't seem right because he wasn't in school. He wasn't around
It's very
people.
common for children to have nightmares because if you put yourself in the child's shoes,
Hmm.
they're a little being on a big planet. And so, really big things are all around them and things that move very fast. There's cars, there's big brothers, there's parents, there's all kinds of experiences. And we often take children to experiences that we think is fun. And it is ultimately, but it might be a firecrackers or it might be, something that's quite energetic. And nightmares are the body processing all this information. It's a whole lot to get put into an embodied form. So
Hmm.
for the child, this is all brand new, and they're trying to process these very, very unique experiences and doing it when they're a little being and surrounded by big beings and big things.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That makes sense. Yeah. And as parents, we don't really think of it that way
Of course
because,
not.
so really thank you for sharing that. So hopefully somebody finds that helpful. Now there are different types of dreams. Could you go over some of the different types of dreams?
Yeah, so we look at in these teachings 7 different kinds of dreams. And I kind of add another one because it's something people ask about. But basically, um, we have different kinds of dreams, and that each of these dreams corresponds to waking life experiences. So we talked about nightmares, that's on one end of the spectrum, but we also have great dreams and dreams of light and more resolved, harmonious, higher level dreams, let's call them. And in waking time, we have these experiences. We have nightmare situations, from the little to the big. I came home from the store yesterday and my eggs had broken in the car. So it's not that big of a deal, but it was a momentary, oh no, and having to like rush to clean something up before my next appointment. But we also have big nightmares in the sense of, clients often will be talking to me and they'll say something like, my boss is such a nightmare. So moments where we have acute feelings of anger or fear in our waking time, and that corresponds to our dreaming time as well. And then we also have just pleasant experiences or even challenging experiences where maybe we're asked to stretch ourselves a little bit. Maybe, let's say at work, we've been given the opportunity to make a big presentation, which is great. And yet, it's going to cause us to stretch because we have to make that presentation. And so that's a kind of a clear dream, let's call it. And then we have moments where maybe we fall in love or we're playing with a child or we catch an amazing sunset. And that gets into the more harmonious, balanced, higher level dreams.
Beautiful. Now, there's a spiritual component, I'm assuming, because we are what they say spirit having a human experience. And so there is like the different spiritual aspects of it. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what you understand about that as far as the spiritual part of it?
Yeah, you said it really well. We're spiritual beings having an embodied experience. And so everything is spiritual. Everything, because everything is presenting me with an opportunity to either see it as mundane or maybe not even see it at all. There's a lot of sleepwalking going on these days as well. A lot of sunsets that people just pass by very quickly. Or we look at each moment as being a spiritual moment as well. We tend to make these sort of divisions that there's this sort of material thing called life, and we have to wash our hair, and that's just what that is. It's not very spiritual, and that a spiritual experience must be something quite ecstatic. But in fact, it's an amazing, miraculous experience to be embodied. If you think about it, if we love someone, we get to hug them. And if we didn't have bodies, we couldn't do that. And so having a body can be an incredibly spiritual experience. So, um, dreaming is, there's always a little bit of something about dreams that's asking us to look at things differently. If I have a nightmare, it's not just I'm having a nightmare. I'm having a nightmare because my body is showing me that something is blocked and tangled and I need to resolve it. So that's a spiritual challenge. Am I going to step up to the plate and do that? Am I going to transform my anger? Am I going to transform my fear? Am I going to face the conflict that I've created in my life or that I'm experiencing in my life or not? So even the most seemingly non-spiritual of dreams is really throwing down a kind of spiritual gauntlet. Am I going to change my life on a daily basis and a moment by moment basis?
Hmm. Yeah, so it kind of speaks to us like on a spiritual level, like inner guidance in a sense. And that kind of brings me to like, okay, are we as a consciousness leaving our body while we're sleeping and actually having these interactions outside of the body in different realms or back home doing a life review, getting guidance? We talk about spirit guides, are we conversing with our spirit guides, helping us to process? So are we actually out of the body, or are we still in the body and we're just experiencing the body sleeping and dreaming?
From our point of view, you're in the body, but we are larger than and expand beyond the physical confines of our body, meaning energetically. And we know this. There's people who see, people's aura. And also, we just know this, whether you can see that or not. We feel in a room if someone's decided to look at us. So, energetically, we extend beyond our bodies. We're receiving information beyond our bodies. And when we're dreaming, we're able to access this more expanded part of ourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I've had a lot of experiences with dreams, especially after my spiritual awakening. One of them, and I meditate before I sleep, and I think it helps me process stuff. And I wake up, I have things that I write and guidance and information. And one of the things that I experienced for a while was out of body experiences, looking at past lives, doing a lot of astral travel. This is what it seemed like, and this is what I was able to put words to make sense of it, to help me to understand what was going on. Because I would meditate for probably a good hour and then get up, do whatever, brush teeth, and get ready for bed and go to sleep. And then it was almost like that state of mind stayed with me into my sleep, and I had all these experiences. And I want to kind of talk about this because like I would see myself, it was like I would see myself get up out of bed as I was sleeping, walk out and go through this almost like portal, if you will. And I could see myself laying there. And it was always like there was this time that I had to be back by.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was really interesting because if I wasn't back by, I don't know what would have happened if I wasn't back by it, but I know there's no time. But it was like a couple times I caught myself just barely making it back into, I guess, body. Um, and then the portal, it was like this portal would just go, it would like close. Can you talk a little bit about that? Are you familiar with those topics?
Yeah, so from this tradition, it comes from the sort of Kabbalist esoteric tradition. And one of the things that they say is that the physical body is like the shoe for the soul. So if you think about that, my foot is in my shoe right now. I am not my foot, but my foot is me. You follow what I'm saying? So if the physical body is the shoe for the soul, then there's also parts of us that are that extend as well beyond that. So I think we can but we're still in our body. I don't leave my foot behind when I go somewhere. I keep my foot, but I can bring my awareness to maybe my shoulder. You see what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then as time evolved and it kept going on, it was like I got to a point, and this is where it kind of started to freak me out. And I kind of stopped doing it because I was like, I don't know where this is going because it was like really freaky. It got to a point where I woke up one morning, um, and it was like my room was because my when I left the body, I went into a place that was like nature. It was a trail, nature, shamanic energy, and like all the trees. There was a water running by, like a river, and then it was like Native American scenery, right? So I woke up and I looked around, and I'm like, my room is like got trees, and it was like I was bringing my dream world into my living world, and it was like meshing. So I got up, went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and I was like, well, maybe I'm just still sleeping. I'll go back in and see, if it's still there. And I went back in, it was still there. And it was like my consciousness was like melding wherever I was or what was going on in that dream world into the present moment. And it was like it wasn't shutting off. Do you know?
So when you say I quit doing it, which part did you quit doing? The meditating before bed or something else?
Um, well, I still kind of meditate before bed, but I just kind of like backed off a little bit from it. I feel like I was just too much into, I don't know. I was like, I can't be doing this anymore, because I don't want that to become, into this present world. It just freaked me out. And I was kind of like, oh, we're done with that. But I still continue to meditate, but it's not the same as it was, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So, one of the reasons why we advocate so much in this tradition of staying in the body is for that. So, I can have incredible experiences, spiritual experiences, great dreams while staying anchored in my body. And in that dream, I may be flying, I may be doing something else, but I haven't left my body. I have had dreams where I have stepped out and left my body. That's different. And it's important to stay anchored to the body and just expand from there rather than to step out of the body to go exploring. We can explore while staying anchored in our body.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it was just really interesting how my mind was still processing that. And there was no shut off. And I don't know if something was happening, with, um, I don't know, the neurons or whatever was in going on in the brain that it just didn't shut it off. When I woke up, I carried it into the present. Yeah.
Well, I believe that meditation, part of what it does is it shifts our awareness of our center of proprioception. I'm not a meditator, but I believe that that's one of the things that happens is that center kind of goes offline, which
Mm.
is what tells us where we are in space. So that's why I was curious about the meditating right before going to bed. Because knowing where we are located in space is really important to have as that home base to come back to. We can meditate, but then you come out of meditation, and depending on the tradition of meditation, there's different things to return to that physical embodied anchor.
Mm.
So I don't know if it was because you were meditating and then completely going into the dream from there, if that was still quite loose in the boundaries and that sort of thing, and so you were having those experiences. I don't know,
Hmm.
but it's a thought.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the topic of it. And like Buddhism, I know Buddhism, I lived in a Buddhist center for 5 years, and they work on inner work using the dream world. If they say if you can perfect the inner, the inner worlds in a dream, then you can escape the wheel of karma, or something like that. So yeah, and it was really interesting, to kind of find out a little bit more about that through the Buddhism. And like I guess that's part of like processing, like we can heal through dreams as well.
One of the main things that we teach in this tradition is how to transform your dreams. So I talked about the different kinds of dreams, and they fall into two different categories, unresolved or resolved. And the way that I explain that is we have moments in our life where we are balanced. And we can maybe call it balance. On a physiological level, we call it homeostasis. We have the right temperature, etc. And we're constantly maneuvering to keep that state of homeostasis. So if it gets too hot, then we start to sweat in response to that. So the same thing, that's our physical body, but we also have an emotional, a mental, and a spiritual body. So how I speak to it. So if my physical, emotional, any of my bodies gets off kilter, um, part of what dreaming does is signal that imbalance to us. And just like the body's natural response to being too hot is to sweat, the natural response is to have a dream to show us that we're out of balance, that our energy is blocked in some way. And then it comes to us to respond to that. So we can do different techniques to take a dream from unresolved to resolved, and that shifts our inner energies, and it goes from energy being bound up in some kind of blockage to being open and free flowing and fluid again. And as well, in doing that, there's a sort of cognitive processing that happens of understanding why. What is the belief system, the patterns that are causing these blockages? And then I can do that work as well to shift those in my waking time. So there's like multiple layers of how dreams help us to heal ourselves, really.
Yeah, yeah. And what are some of those techniques? I know of one that I worked with, like journaling when I wake up in the morning. Sometimes, and I find this is interesting because my dream, like if I try to interpret it by a dream book, using some symbols and, oh, this is what this means if you had like an airplane or a car or you're flying, through the air, whatever the case may be. I would journal and I would start out with like, it seems like as if, like without me putting meaning to it. And if I was to look up in a book, it would have a total different meaning. So if we use dream books, are we kind of not really interpreting it correctly and not allowing it to really unfold? Because if I'm writing one thing about my dream without looking it up, and then I look it up and it says something totally different, like how do we really know what it actually means?
I don't advise dream books at all because dream books look at symbols and they look at one size fits all. A tree means this, this means this, but none of us are one size fits all. And images are not symbols. They're alive, they're moving, and they're composed of all of our subjective experiences. So a tree that you will dream will look, smell, feel, be different than a tree that I will dream. And either one of those will be different in a different context at a different time in our life. So we can get very confused if we look in dream dictionaries. What's better is to look inside oneself, to take ownership of one's own imagery and begin to look at it. And one of the ways in is to just assume that it has something to say and that it's saying it in image as opposed to saying it in words.
Mm.
And we actually do that all the time, all day long. We say things like, I'm so busy right now and work is so hard, I feel like I'm just constantly rolling a boulder uphill. That's an image. Or we might say, it's spring. I feel like a chicken that just pecked out of my shell. That's telling me something about how I feel and what I know and how I'm responding to what's going on. So we have images that feature in our speech all the time. And if we step back from needing to have a very fixed answer of something and just look at our dreams as curious things that are telling us something in image, we get a lot closer to understanding what they're trying to tell us.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, is there another way to do that? Like aside from like maybe doing journaling?
Journaling works for you, that's great. Another sort of thing that we teach is I have people to write down their dream in the morning and then set it aside and then come back at the end of the day and read it out loud. Because when we write it down in the morning, we're still very much in that dream state. And it's difficult because we don't really have distance to it. But when we actually read it out loud to ourselves at the end of the day, we're going to hear something very, very different. And people tell me all the time, oh, as soon as I started reading it out loud, I knew what that dream was about. So that's another tip.
Beautiful, beautiful. And also, like, there's also this kind of dream, because I know there's different types of dream. Like you already kind of went over some, and then as far as like recurring dreams, there's the recurring dreams, which I've also experienced, where it would happen like multiple times throughout the night, and then it was like a month, and then all of a sudden something shifted or changed, and then it changed. The dream changed, but it was like multiple times again throughout the night in a different way. And then, so is that saying something that something has either changed in our daily life, or is it just something that we see differently in life, or what is going on in those situations?
I mean, all of the above. If I'm dreaming the same thing over and over and over and over, I have a very fixed perspective on something. I'm stuck. And then if I shift that and I begin to get a different perspective, then the dream is just inherently going to shift because dreams are mirroring back to us our waking time. They're mirroring back to us how we feel and what we know and what we want to do. And so if I'm stuck in that and I have just one very stuck view, I'm going to keep repeating that until I shift that view. And then the whole configuration is going to shift.
Mm. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like the karmic cycle. When you're talking about it, and it's like we keep living that out like in our dream world. And did you ever see what was the movie with Bill Murray, Groundhog Day?
Hmm.
Like we keep playing it out like in our dream worlds, and until we start changing it. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
And we can change it. I've been
Mm-hmm.
talking about it being a fixed view. So we can close our eyes and look at that view and shift our eyes and see what else is there.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many ways to interact with our dreams, and it's important to dialogue with them. It's not like Netflix where we're passively receiving something. This is coming from us. It's of us. And so we can close our eyes and, after the third or fourth time, maybe we don't want to repeat that anymore, just like Bill Murray didn't. And look, what is that view and what other views are possible there?
Mm. Would you say, and this just came to me, would you say it would be a good idea to set intention before we go to sleep when we're in those situations? I want to see from a different perspective, like set
We
those
can.
intentions before bed.
Yeah, we can. Or even more open. What other perspectives are possible for me to see?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that would help. Definitely. And then Also, we have the sleepwalking. You did touch a little bit on that. That's an interesting experience to sleepwalk. I had one when I was a teenager. And what is going on in that place? Or because usually when we're sleeping, our body isn't interacting, but something within our body is allowing us to get up, walk around, do things. Like, is there some kind of psychological happening going on there that, you know, like our body isn't detached where we're just laying there?
It's more physiological and it's getting into sleep research away from dreaming, actually.
Mm.
So, when we go to sleep, there are certain hormones that are released in our brain that somewhat paralyze our muscles so that we don't sleepwalk. So that if we're having a dream about, you know, racing down the highway, we don't just walk out our door and race down the highway. And I don't know the particulars because I'm not a sleep researcher. But it's something about how the levels of those chemicals and how they're released, I think. But again, that's, you know,
Mm. Yeah.
a,
It's definitely an
a,
interesting topic,
mhm.
also as well, because there's a lot of things that happen, you know, during the sleep, you know, that maybe people aren't aware of. And then we also have where they feel like something's trying to get them and then they're paralyzed. I forget the name of it. Um,
Sleep paralysis.
yes, had that before. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's more common than people think. And that's sort of the reverse, which is that we're moving out of a certain stage of sleep and coming closer to consciousness. But those chemicals in our brain are have not kept at the same pace. So we're coming to consciousness, but our muscles and everything is still held at bay. And so it's quite common to have the experience of feeling like someone is holding us down and something like this.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 It's really interesting. And you did talk a little bit, I believe, about the secret mind. Can you go into what is the secret mind?
Yeah, so The Secret Mind, the title of the book that I wrote, what I mean by that is we're dreaming all the time. And there's different ways to understand that. And one, the most sort of simple way is the default network that is active when we're dreaming is also active when we're awake and we are mind wandering or daydreaming. So it's kind of like, I don't know if this has happened to you, but for many, there's been a moment at some point being in the shower and being totally relaxed, not thinking, and suddenly, oh, I have this idea, or now I know what I need to do. It's because we shifted over into the default network. And it's really a problem-solving powerhouse for us because it is very much the center of our imagination and being able to see new perspectives and new places that we can go. And so the secret mind, what I mean by that is it's always there. And it's secret because it seems elusive, but we can learn to consciously access it. It's really hidden in plain sight, actually. And one of the ways that we do that is by either focusing on our night dreams and or taking moments in our day to look inside and to pause and not just be so go, 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 go at every second. And then there's a second sort of meaning that I make of the secret mind, which is there's a whole body of work that I lay out in the book about making the connections between dreaming and waking life. And as soon as we begin to understand how waking life and dreaming reflect each other, then we begin to see how incredibly malleable waking life is. And when you really get into your mind how to transform a dream, then there are very subtle shifts that we can take in our waking time to shift situations. And we already talked about one, which is recognizing I have a stuck perspective, and finding a different perspective. We can take it upon ourselves. Many people, like Groundhog's Day, they say, "Ah, I keep having the same conflict with this person over and over." To me, that immediately signals, okay, it's a repetitive nightmare. And so I'm going to find a different point of view. I'll give an example of that. When I lived in LA years ago, I was quite active with the mayor's office at the time that was trying to get people to use an actual mechanic for proper recycling of the oil rather than changing the oil in your driveway or on the side of the street. We called them street mechanics. And that was a very intense thing as well because all of the gutter system in LA goes straight to the Santa Monica Bay. So all of this oil was finding its way into the bay. So there was a big effort campaign to get people to not do that. I was really, really, really involved in this. And one morning I was walking my dog and it was just barely sunrise. And I turn the corner and I see at the end of the street this guy, I thought, pouring oil directly down a gutter. And I just start screaming at him, "Stop pouring the oil." And he screams back at me, "It's broken." And I scream back, "Stop pouring the oil." And he screams back, "It's broken." And we scream this back and forth. And then finally, I'm like, wait a minute. We're literally screaming the same thing back and forth, and neither one is understanding the other or moving at all. So I did another technique that I talk about in the book, which is a technique of reversing. And I just closed my eyes and reversed on the situation, and I saw that in fact he did have a something was broken, the receptacle that he was holding. And because my mind, this is cognitive perceptual bias, was so focused on street mechanics that I made a massive assumption. So I start saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And I walk up to him, and it was a young guy who had arrived at a construction site early. And this was a bottle of chemicals that had broken accidentally and spilled on him. And he was really upset about it. And so then I was able to help him and all of that. But it could have remained at an impasse. But because I was such a dreamer, I understood there's something that's not making sense here and it's repeating, and there has to be another point of view.
Mhm. Yeah. And well, hopefully that got all resolved, yeah, but definitely can see how that can play out. And I think a lot of times that we misunderstand when we're in our minds about stuff like that, like how like something that kind of simulates that can like bring us into that space. It's almost like, if you're sitting there outside or sitting somewhere and there's other people around you and they're looking past you, but you think you're looking at you, like and we respond to that. So definitely the mind can like almost play tricks on us in a way, in a sense, depending on where we're at. So what if people, if they say, Dr. Bonnie, I don't remember my dreams, so how can I do the dream work? What can they do if they don't remember dreams?
Yeah, it's very easy to begin to remember your dreams, and it starts with getting a dream journal and having it by your bed and write on the first blank page, "Tonight I will have a clear dream and remember," and do it. Write down the dream when you wake up with it. Um, it's a known thing in sleep and dream research. It just takes a little bit of intention and we begin to remember our dreams. And the more intention we put towards it, the more we make it a practice, the more we'll remember our dreams and the more vibrant they will become.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. I do thank you so much, Bonnie, for joining us today. Was there any other topics that you might feel would be helpful for people about dreams or maybe navigating their life or help them how to interpret their dreams?
Yeah, I mean, we know what's right for us at in almost all situations and moments. And it's a question of whether we're listening to ourselves. And we often state that in the negative, meaning that we say, that isn't right for me. So we can say that very clearly. It's not, no, I don't want to take that job. It's not right for me. Or no, I don't want to go to that restaurant. I don't like it. It's harder to state what I do want, the job I do want, the career I want, the university I want to go to, whatever it may be. So, one of the tools, the gifts of dreaming, is to just get in the practice of writing down every single thing you wake up with. Just that. No editing, no criticizing, no dismissing. Just get in the practice of writing it down. That gets us used to seeing what's on our inside and beginning to repair that relationship and get closer to ourselves and being able to hear when we come to a moment where it's like that very clearly what's right for me is XYZ.
Mm.
So I would sort of like leave that for your listeners to get a dream journal and begin to write your dreams. And if you find yourself editing or criticizing, the very common one I get all the time is, I mean, that was such a weird dream. Um, maybe it's not such a weird dream after all, or that doesn't make any sense. Those same statements people tell me when I'm doing a coaching session with them. We're not talking about a dream, but we're talking about something they want to do in their waking life. And they'll say, I mean, it's really weird, but I kind of don't want to take this promotion, for example. That's not weird. That's you. So, learning how to simply write down our dreams is a first step to then being able to just acknowledge what is right for us in our waking time.
Thank you. And where can
Yeah.
people find you if they wanted to find out more about what you do, book a session, get your book?
Yeah, so the book is The Secret Mind, Unlock the Power of Dreams to Transform Your Life, and you can find that on Amazon. You can find me at bonniebuckner.com. You can find the classes that we teach at Institute for Dreaming and Imagery.com. And you'll find there all of our socials as well. We're on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn for the career professionals who are your listeners. And we're on Facebook as well.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much for the work that you do, Bonnie. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, really.
You're welcome.